Awesome. We are live. Hey, everybody. Welcome to my first ever live stream about investing in real estate. And today's topic is going to be real estate investing for resilience. And because that's the topic, I wanted to bring my dear, dear, dear longtime friend. I think it's been like 10 years of friendship, right, Jen? I wanted to bring Jen on. Jen Chavez is a really great friend of mine. And I've learned so much from her over the past few years. We met in a business that was uh, also geared to the topic of investing in our future. And I think that's what today is really going to be about is like, how do you want to invest your time and energy right now to safeguard your future and what your future looks like? So if you're watching right now, go ahead and just drop down where you're watching from in the comments right here. And so I know I love seeing where people are watching from and your name, of course. But Jen, when she first purchased her home, she had no idea of the impact that it would make on her life financially. And through the ups and the downs of her, real estate choices, it's given her the options and the leverage to really design the life that she wants because of the investments that she's made. And that's why I find it so inspiring, not because it sounds like this crazy, glorious, like rags to riches story. It's like an achievable story, right, Jen?
Absolutely. 100%. I had no clue what I was doing.
So what today? Yeah, and that's so good. Like if you don't know what you're doing right now, hopefully by the end of this there's a little bit more clarity. But Jen also didn't know what she was doing, and that's why I think she's such a great story to highlight. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with Jen's story, and then I'll tell you a little bit about my story. I'm Tiffin, by the way. I didn't get to introduce myself, just in case you haven't met me yet. And I'm a realtor with Keller Williams Pacific Estates out in Long Beach, California, which is the #1 brokerage out here. Really proud to say that. And learning about real estate and having, 20, 30 conversations a day about real estate has taught me so much. And I just wanted to simply relay that information to you and be a resource to you. So let's start with Jen's story. Jen, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone?
I'm Jen Chavez. I live currently in Portland, Maine, as physically far away from Tiff in the continental U.S. that I can be, unfortunately. I got started actually in 2012, I believe, is when I bought my first home. I was 25, and I was with my partner at the time. He was my boyfriend, and then we would go on to get married. But we just renewed our lease at our apartment, and I thought that I didn't really understand the concept of buying a house, but I was like, I know I want to do that next. That's like our next step. And let's start looking now, because I know I'm going to be incredibly picky. And so I know that for me, I'm like, I'm going to walk in and I'm just going to instantly know if I like something or not. So I thought this was going to be like a really long, hard experience. And it actually wasn't. We went and we saw one house with our realtor, and the market was really competitive. We were living in Denver at the time, still competitive there. But she took us to a house to see what we liked, what we didn't like, so we can get an idea, and she could start sending us some listings. And one of the things that she had us do was drive around the neighborhoods of the listings that we liked to see if that's some place we would actually want to live. So she sent us like 50 listings that night, and that night we picked like 4. And so the next day I drove around and I pulled up to this house, and I instantly knew. I was like, we're going to buy this house. I had no concept of what that meant. And so I called my realtor and was like, hey, we want to buy this house. And she's like, you need to get pre-approved. I was like, I don't know what that means, but okay. So we called a lender Saturday afternoon. I think we got approved at like 10 p.m. that night, and had the first showing Sunday morning. And our house was by the football stadium. So it was a game day. So the fact that we even got a showing that day, now that I have since lived there, I realized was insane. So we get the first showing, we put in an offer, and they accept it, and we like go under contract at like 6 a.m. Monday morning. So then we decided maybe we should call our parents and let them know that we were buying a house like now, I guess. And so it was flawless. It was very much meant to be. It was it's not how buying a house normally would go. And our realtor told us that once all the papers were signed and keys were in hand, she said, just so you know, you'll never have this experience again. And I haven't, but it was a really great first experience. And
Wow, that's amazing. I have a few questions for you before you move on. So, what you're describing, as you said, is like not a typical like transaction where everything goes very smoothly, everything is happening chop chop chop. It could go like that. But I have some questions that I think our viewers might have, which is like, did you grow up knowing that you were going to buy a house? Was that something that was in your purview at all times? Did you always want to buy a house? Like, these are things I'm curious about. And number three, like, where'd you get the down payment? Because like that's everyone's number one question is like, how much money do I need to have down for my first house?
so I grew up in the time of, you there's a certain timeline for your life and you're just supposed to do things a certain way, and you meet someone and you buy a house and has the picket fence and you get married, and kind of roughly in that order. And so that's what I was supposed to do. So I think I just assumed I would do it because that's what I was supposed to do. So it wasn't necessarily something very thought through. It was just like, oh, this is on the checklist of what it means to participate in society. So it was just kind of presumed, I would say. And then in terms of the down payment, I had savings. At the time I was living in an apartment, I had two roommates. I was living with my partner and then our friend. So rent was relatively affordable. And then the business that you and I are in separately, where we met, that was providing a significant income stream. So I was putting a lot of that money to the side.
Okay. So let's pause here. So this is great because some people are working away and they might be living alone or they're living with their partner and they're paying the average millennials paying $3,000, $3,500 a month in rent right now. And they have maybe one or two jobs between the two of them. But what you're saying is that you had a job and you also had this business on the side that allows you to generate even additional income for you to actually save, and you were renting with other people. So that's sort of where the savings came from.
Right. And then we did an FHA loan. So we only had to put 3% down. So that was not that, like, relatively, that wasn't like a huge chunk of change between the two of us, fortunately. So
Awesome. So would you mind sharing how much that was? The 3%?
I'm that would require some math.
So long ago, you don't remember.
It was so long ago. Yeah, it was. Hold on, let me do some quick math. Let me pull out my calculator. It was about $11,000.
$11,000. Awesome. So,
Oh.
y'all, $11,000 to get your financial future started. Like, I mean, $11,000 was a little bit more money back then, but not by much. Not by much.
I mean, it's not no money, and it does take time to save up and whatnot, but it's not like you need $20,000, $40,000, $50,000. And I'll get to this later in my story, but also, if it's your first home, definitely you can have an FHA loan, but just if it's not your first home, you can still have an FHA loan. So in the house I just purchased in Maine, I also have an FHA loan, and I put like 7% down. So
okay. How'd you do that? I know we'll get to the rest of your story, but I just
it just depends. There's certain parameters. I don't know all of the parameters. Like, I'm in it and I'm trusting it, and I hire people right. So bring in the people and a team that you trust. But when I talked to my lender, FHA was an option. I met those requirements for whatever the parameters were. I think it was because it was going to become a primary home for me. I was able to. So you can do that. And then my second home, which again we'll get back to in my story, is a conventional loan. So I didn't have a current FHA loan. Like I said, I don't know the parameters on the rules on that. You have to look that up. But
okay. But the point is that there are many ways to skin a cat. And if you don't know that expression, it's a boomer expression, and I'm a boomer on the inside, stuck in a millennial body. But there's a million ways to do this. And so, yeah. Okay. Thank you, Jen. So the first house you bought with about $10,000 down on an FHA loan. And then what happened?
So then we lived in that house until 2020. We got divorced, and like so many people,
Yep.
and so in that divorce, we decided to sell the house and split the profits in our parting of ways. And so when we went to sell the house, it had doubled in value, which was
Doubled in value. And that was how long? From when you bought it to 2020?
about 8 years, just under 8 years when
Okay,
we
awesome.
sold it. So yeah, 8 years later, it had doubled in value, which was huge. That house saved my life because of that. And so, yeah, so we sold the house. We were able to split it. I was eligible for alimony, and I did not want to be tied to my spouse any longer. So, because of the money we made from that house, he was able to lump sum pay me out from there. And so, it created this leverage. We put in that, like $6,000 each to get started. And now I was walking away with well over $200,000. Like, that's a huge jump in the
Wow.
course of 8 years. And that's not always typical for markets to grow that big and
Yeah.
that.
Disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. Let's just make a broad blanket disclaimer. These results may not be typical. We're not financial advisors. But this is Jen's story.
Yeah. So that allowed me to be able to put a down payment on a new house. And so when I got divorced in mediation, I made sure we put a clause in that I could buy property after mediation, even before everything was finalized, to make sure that he couldn't come after any acquired property. And so that made a big difference for me to get into a house quicker, because paperwork and lawyers and all those things can take a while.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So
pausing on sort of like the logistical point of that, like I also want to touch on like emotionally, how did you feel that you were able to have sort of this accumulated amount of money to sort of move on with your life, but also, being able to put like the clause in, making sure that like it's yours, and like all of the weird nuances surrounding that situation? Like, what sort of like were you feeling at that time?
Oh, well, when you go through divorce, you feel all the things all the time, but I was really proud of myself. I was really proud that we bought the house the first time, but it didn't really set in. It all happened so fast. It happened so easy. I didn't know a lot. I didn't know what I didn't know. And then after and learning about the actual house buying process and experience, it was like, wow, that was an anomaly. Also, that's a really big deal that I did that at such a young age. And so being able to do it on my own in a relationship that I just felt very small in, and to get this adorable house this other adorable house in Denver, which is also my first offer I put in. So I've freakishly positive experiences, but yeah, it was, I don't know. It's very empowering and exciting and really cool to have something that's like yours, especially after going through an experience like that. So
Yeah, awesome. So you were able to roll in that money that you got from the first house into your second house.
yes, so that was
Cool.
huge, because I was self-employed and there was challenges with lending in terms of what they would accept as income and not, and
Hmm.
being tied to my ex-husband in different layers. So being able to have a substantial down payment on my next house helped with that process, because I was able to put over 50% down on my next home, which also um, allowed me to have a significantly lower mortgage payment. So as I was transitioning through these seasons, it really teed me up financially and put me in a really good position, to kind of be able to keep breathing, because it's
Hmm.
an ongoing process. It's a lot of grief that follows. And so to alleviate some of that financial stress and have a home and have my own space that was just mine that belonged to me was really a big deal.
It is a really big deal. And something that you also just mentioned is that you were not like a traditional candidate for loans. And so having a bigger down payment from that first investment really helped you. That's something that me and my partner talk about all the time because I'm not a traditional W 2. She's a traditional W 2. And so sometimes, depending on the season of life, having a W 2 can be helpful for a little while until you have that lump sum, you have a little bit more choices, but there's always a way, it sounded like.
Yes. W-2s, while I don't necessarily love being in the system for my current real estate goals and my previous real estate goals, I did go back to a W-2 when it came time to buy that second home, or my first solo home, but the second home I've ever purchased. I did go back to having a W-2 for that. So yeah, it helps. It makes a difference. So if you have less traditional employment, you can absolutely do that. I know there's different hoops to jump through. I personally have not chosen to pursue that, just out of my own personal choices. I refied as a self-employed person, and that was ridiculously challenging. And so I prefer to have the W-2 for my real estate transactions.
Yeah, I heard that. Okay, so you bought your second house. You have a lower monthly payment, give you some breathing room, and then what happens?
And then I came out to Maine and I fell in love with the state of Maine, and that was not my plan. And so I knew I had to move here. And so I came back here and got my ducks in a row and listed my house last year in Denver to rent while I was in Maine. And I hired a property management company to handle that first year. I've recently parted ways with them. That was not a good fit for me, but it was a good fit for that transition. And then when I got to Maine, I rented and for the first time since 2012. And it was a very chaotic experience, whole different story. But then once I kind of got some stability, I started looking for a house. Once I realized I knew I was going to stay here. I think I always knew in my gut, but I wanted to wait till I got here and like give it a minute. But I decided I was going to buy a house here. Rent is very high in Portland, and it was really hard to stomach paying someone else's mortgage when I hadn't done that for so long. And so fortunately, my property in Denver was cash flowing. I did put a sizable down payment. I did refi right before I left. And so that gave me money to move, which was huge.
Okay, let's pause for the people watching. So you had your house. So you don't have your first house anymore because you sold that house, got the money from it, and then you bought your second house. You still have that second house, which is now considered like house number one because you lived in it first and then you moved to Maine. And then you said something like refi. So for the people watching right now, what is refi?
So I refinanced my house. And so when I purchased my Denver house, I'll just refer to it as my Denver house now. When I purchased my Denver house, I did have a co-signer because of the trickiness with all that stuff. And so once all that kind of died down, I refied, so it was solely in my name. And so when I did the refinance, that means they change the financing depending on the interest rate and give you a new loan. And so when I did that, I did a cash out refi so that I got a lump sum of money with that, with the intention of putting a down payment on another home and then using some of that money to cover moving expenses, because moving across the country is not cheap.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
So with that cash out refi, I had a lump sum of money waiting when I was ready to buy in Maine. So I just kept that in a high yield savings account. So it was ready when I needed it and was still accruing some base level of interest.
Okay, so we're going to talk about this because I think the big overarching picture of today, we're not going to get into a lot of specifics. I'm not a lender, I'm not a financial advisor, but when I think people are thinking about buying a home, they think that buying a home is solely just to live in it, just like you're paying rent, but somehow you have ownership over it. And for me, one of the biggest things I've learned in working in real estate is that you're not just buying the home, you're buying the equity. And when we talk about equity, like what is that? So without equity, you're refinance, like, trying to get the cash out. And we won't go into specifics about that, but think about it as if like a traditional mortgage where let's say you put $10,000 down, you bought a $400,000 house, or maybe it was 200,000 at the time, to put 10 grand down. You're essentially buying $200,000 worth of equity once that is paid off. But even if you don't pay off and you paid off $100,000 worth of it, you now have $100,000 worth of equity. That is basically money that essentially you could cash out and do something with, or you can sell the property and get that amount back, because obviously you still have the remainder of the loan. But if you do pay off the property and you want to sell it, and over 8 years it doubles, so you go from 200 to 400. You now have $400,000 you did not have when you started out. So thinking of mortgages or buying a house as instead of just the house that we live in, which is a beautiful thought because we need a house to live in. We want it to be beautiful. We want it to be the home that we choose. And it's also a vehicle for, like Julie was saying, liberation, a vehicle for for some financial benefits that we didn't have prior. And so I can go on a longer tangent about this, but that's sort of the biggest realization that I'm having about your story as well, is like over time, how you've been able to leverage, the word leverage.
Yeah. Leveraging the equity. I mean, that was what
Yeah.
the equity in the first house, that's what allowed me in the very first house, that's what allowed me to buy my Denver house. And having that equity put all into one house, I was able to take some of that out and then use that for Maine. And so really that first house really teed me up for leveraging the ability to have multiple properties and adding an income stream that I didn't have before.
Yes. So now you have your Denver house, and you bought your house in Maine, and
Yeah, I
you
bought
were
it.
looking for a renter.
Yeah, I have. Yes, I was.
I know. And then I called you last week, and then while we were on the phone, I think I'm good luck is that someone put an application in, and that person became the new renter.
Yes, that's my new tenant. So I decided to take back the property management piece for myself and manage from a distance. And I found a great community of people who are also landlords and resources. And now that I have stability in Maine, I have the capacity, I feel like, and the ability to support someone in that situation over there. I have a great community. I have a great team in Denver on the ground there that helps. So that's been a terrifying but empowering transition. And yeah, I was looking for a tenant last week when Tiff called and was very stressed and very much felt like I had imposter syndrome in this part of my life. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Maybe I should hire somebody. Maybe like I'm not supposed to be doing this. Like I was just not feeling good about it. And Tiff's like, I want you to come speak about investing. Like you're doing so well. And I was like, I don't know that I don't feel that. But anyway, it was very encouraging. And then yeah, in the middle of phone calls, like, hold on, an application came through. And then he's moving in next week. So I'm very excited about it. And
Awesome.
things come together. It's scary. But yeah, it's worth it. I'm incredibly grateful. And like I said, it's given me a home there and a home here, which is huge. Having that housing stability, especially being displaced in my move here, has really been huge. Knowing that this is mine, I own it. The payments come back to me in the sense that like when I go to sell it, the equity and all that. And so it's
awesome. Yeah. And like I was saying at the beginning, y'all, is that I know a lot of people who invest in real estate. Someone who I know is watching right now. And I feel like people make it seem really big and it is big in a way where it's big in that it can be really life-changing. But also it doesn't have to be super glamorous. And usually real estate investing is not super glamorous. And though Jen made it look so simple and so easy, and just like how the practicality of of what she was able to do because she started in home ownership is pretty amazing. So one house essentially turned into two over the course of just like 8 to 10 short years, right? So like around 10 years, one house turned into two. But there's something called like an exponential factor that I know, Jen, you had some plans of investing again in the future in homes in Kansas City or wherever you choose to go next. And so when we talk about like, it's sort of the hardest part is to get to one, and then after one and then two and then the third one, after the third one there's going to be like sort of a snowball effect, because you learn how to get better at investing, you learn how to be a better property manager, you learn how to pick the better tenants, or all the little tiny things that you can do to make your life and process easier after three home transactions that you've done just personally, is going to help you scale onto that next level, right? So like, what are your thoughts? Because I know there's going to be some people, and I want to be the devil's advocate here, is like, I've heard some people say, well, there's taxes and insurance and there's like all of these other liabilities that come from owning real estate. Renting is just so much easier. And we're not here to tell you how to live your life, because like that's not what it's for. It's just about showing you what's possible and you get to choose. So like, what would you say to that piece?
I mean, like, to each their own. Like, if you want to rent, like, go for it. That's totally your prerogative in your business. I personally, I'm really glad I bought a house when I did, and I'm glad that I'm able to have this. Yes, there's added, or can be perceived as added expenses. Those are built into your rent, so you're still paying those things whether you see it on the bill or not, and then you're paying extra for the cash flow. So it depends on what you're working with. Like here, my mortgage is slightly less than my rent that I was paying here. They're pretty comparable because I didn't put that much money down. But instead of giving that to somebody else, like, this house is mine and I can paint the walls teal, so it's, no one's gonna, I'm not gonna have a lease end, or be without a place to live, and there's not, I have to be, like, have a dog and, like, he scratches the floor. Am I sad about it? No, but like, it's not gonna impact any, like, it's mine. And so
Yeah.
it just creates a different sense of ease for me.
Yeah.
And like I said, like we said, like, when you go to sell, those investments can potentially pay off in sizable ways, as your property values increases and things like that. So it's
Yeah.
it's an investment. You're not seeing the cash right then and there, but it can come back.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And full disclosure, like, me and my spouse are still renting and we're understanding what we're losing as we're renting. And right now for the season, this is what we have to do. But we're now taking more serious steps in not renting anymore and buying our first home together, and having an actual direction, to go in. And so the other day, actually, I was listening to a real estate investor saying his first property he bought was an investment property, and that's totally possible too, where you can rent where you're living, if that makes sense, and you can buy your first investment property, and rent it out and cash flow from it, or just have it pay the mortgage and have it just sit there if you want to. There's all kinds of ways that you can do this. So no judgment on that part. It's just about what makes sense. Like, what I really wanted to hone in on is how simple it could be if you have the right resources, if you are able to learn about the different ways you can get your foot in the door, you might be closer than you think. And so over the past week, I think I've had 4 or 5 consultations with buyers. And the number one thing I realized that they realized is that they thought they needed 12 months to be able to buy a house, when instead they could have done it in 3. Or they thought they needed all these crazy circumstances, like they needed to have excellent credit, they needed to have like $100,000 saved up, they also needed to have like this crazy amount of income. And then they come to find, for the thing that they want, they actually just they had 2 out of 3 things that they needed, and they just need to work on that one piece, and they're just like that little step away. And so I want to tell you that because I think reaching out and making the decision audience, viewers, is the first step. Whether you want to become an investor or you want to buy your own home, your own primary home, the first step is reaching out, asking for support, and seeing like what truly are your possibilities. Because before that, you're just sort of guessing, and there's sort of like a fear in the unknown of like whether or not you know this is possible. And so, like, I also wanted to share one quick story. And this story is about my mom and about how she was able to invest in some pieces of land out of state and some other investment properties. And we rented while I was growing up. But when her business came crashing down in 2008 due to employee embezzlement in the economy, actually, the cash that she had to try and save that store, which she couldn't save because she didn't know that the employee was embezzling the money, but she had cashed out an entirety of investments that were like her insurance policies, her real estate, all that stuff was like nearly $6 million in assets that she cashed out to try and save that store. That's a lot of money. It's a lot. And, she had like bought these like really huge pieces of land out in middle America somewhere that like over time she like forgot about, and it went up in value, and she was able to help cash that out and like try and save the store. So like it's interesting how time and time again investing in real estate has sort of helped us pivot and helped us move on to like that next chapter of our life. So that's the new perspective I want to give. And also, owning a home looks like it's a lot of fun. You can do a lot of cool stuff. you know. So
Some days.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't want to go back to renting, but especially owning as a single wannabe reno girly who's very much not. I want to be in my head, but I'm not a reno girly. The projects seem cooler until they're started.
yeah, exactly.
But it's great. It's. I mean, I wouldn't give it up for anything.
Yeah, awesome. Well, this was not meant to be like the most informative, although I hope it was. It was really meant to challenge some of the beliefs that I'm hearing after doing, a bunch of consultations with people who want to buy homes, like hearing the biggest things holding them back, and basically feeling like it's way out of reach, and that Jen's story hopefully helped you see that it's very much within reach, that you have the ability. And like, I want you to think about also, I pulled up some stats from the NAR, and although it doesn't look like millennials are buying homes, we actually own about 37% of the home buying share in market in like 2020. 37% is not, something to laugh at. Of course, the other percentages are the boomers, and the boomers are, hitting retirement. They're wanting to downsize. There's going to be a lot of opportunity in sort of how that real estate and wealth transfers over to the millennial generation. And so there's a huge opportunity for us now that we have, jobs, we have, a little bit more stability. And if not, like, of course, like what Jen was saying, she had to make some sacrifices. She didn't live in her own place. And then also she had, side gigs that were able to produce some extra cash for some savings. And it just took a little. And that little, like $10,000, $12,000 between the two of them went a long, long way over time. So I know that it's tempting to like delay this. And I'm also speaking to myself, but the sooner the better, sounds like, right? There's never going to be a better time than today, because tomorrow is just going to, the home prices are just going to increase.
The rates are going to change. And that's the thing. I think I heard this phrase, date the rate, like marry the house. And so are the rates higher now? Absolutely. Do I have a higher rate buying out in Maine this time of year? 100%. But when the rates go down, whenever, should that ever happen, like if they go up, then I got in before they went up. And if they go down, I can refinance and get a lower rate, and it'll shift everything. So it's not forever, right? So things are very malleable. And I would say definitely talk to a lender first, before, like get with a realtor, wonderful, and get with a lender and find out what you can qualify for, if anything, or like what you're missing. And so when I had
Yeah.
those conversations for when I was going to refi my Denver house, I was like, hey, where am I at with everything? Do I need to make changes? And they're like, no, you're good. And you can take cash out right now. And I was not anticipating that at the time. And so I thought it was going to have to be this whole big thing, and it wasn't. And so ask questions, check in and see. And maybe you don't qualify right away and you need to change your credit score or get more for a down payment or whatever it is. Or you qualify for a $400,000 house. You need to what you're looking at is $600,000. Okay, what do you need to do to close that gap? And so reaching out and asking questions is really the best way to find out versus just guessing and assuming things
Yeah, and doom scrolling on Zillow.
and doom scrolling.
So yeah, it's so true. So if y'all are looking to have a conversation with a lender, actually Julie, who's on the live stream right now, we just hooked her up with one this morning and got in their information, and it's just going to give them a snapshot. There's no like obligation or anything to buy right now. It's just like at least you can have a roadmap to work towards. And so Julie, we're going to hear back about yours pretty soon, and I'll let you know when we hear back. And yeah, and of course realtors will have access to some of the information, most of the information that you're going to want, and do your homework. Go with someone that you trust. It's a people game, it's a relationship game. Like we when looking for someone that's suitable for you, think about the most important things, like what are the values you want them to uphold, what do you want the outcome to be, do they represent that for you? Those are all things to consider. So with that said, I'm going to wrap it all up. This was so much fun. Put in the comments like if you had any insights. I'm going to be doing more of these, and some of them will be just like this, and others will be more informative, more information on the market or how to buy a house. So, or how to sell your home for the best rate possible, especially 1031 exchanges. What does that mean? So there's going to be all kinds of topics that I'll cover on a monthly basis with these live streams. So be sure to look out for them. And before we go, Jen, what are you up to these days, and how can people find you if they want to connect with you?
I'm up to all sorts of things. I'm getting ready to launch a course, and that's in the works. I wanted to put a thing out to collect your emails, but technology was not cooperating today on my platform. So I would love to connect with you on Instagram. That's the best place to connect with me right now. It's on my name on the screen, I think.
No, I'll put your name up here. Yep, there you go. Put it in the comments.
At Jen Chavez 5280. Yeah, I am multi-passionate, so I have my hand in a lot of different things, but real estate and investing is one of them, and entrepreneurship, and just being able to craft a life that aligns with you and who you are, and not necessarily what you're supposed to do or what you should do, and kind of really embodying what it means for you as a person. So I'm really passionate about helping specifically women with that, but I have worked and done consulting with men as well. And yeah, I'd love to connect with you more if you felt what I was sharing was valuable.
Awesome. Thank you, Jen. And if you are in the California area or even outside, because I'm helping people outside too through referral basis, I'm a realtor. Keller Williams Pacific Estates. I'm having so much fun. I never thought I could be having so much fun doing real estate. It's so weird to me, but I'm here. I'm here for it, and I freaking love it. And so reach out to me with any questions. I'm here to help. I'm here to be a resource for you and make sure that we can support you in whatever goals or life changes that are happening. Real estate investing for resilience, whatever you need to do to get to that next part of your life. Hopefully I can support you in that. So reach out to me, Aquino-Vin, Tiffany Aquino-Vin on Instagram, same as my name. And I will see you next time. Thank you, y'all.